Hello everyone, and welcome to the first official video on the channel. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Sabby. I have over 10 years of coaching experience and a master's degree in sports psychology. Back in 2018, I began using my experience in education to help Rocket League players who wanted to take their games to the next level. And over 1,000 sessions later, I've noticed a few common mistakes that I end up discussing with students more than anything else. So in this video, I'm going to be revealing what these mistakes are, and hopefully it's going to help any of you guys who are making similar mistakes in your own games. So without any further ado, here are some of the most commonly discussed topics during my coaching sessions. Regardless of what rank a student is, I will always take a quick look at their settings to make sure that they are set up for success and are not developing any bad habits that will be impossible to break as they invest more and more time with them. You will be amazed at how often I see players trying to reinvent the wheel by creating unnecessarily complicated keybinds that are actually doing more harm than good. When it comes to keybinds, there is an argument to be made that it is largely up to personal preference. For example, I couldn't stand pressing down on the right joystick to look behind me, so I changed that to something that was far more accessible to me. However, in order to play effectively, there is one simple rule that I tell all of my students to follow. And that is, can you comfortably jump, boost, power slide, and air roll all at the same time? If the answer to this question is no, then you probably need to make some adjustments to your controls. Outside of this basic rule, there are several things that you can do to min-max your controls to make them more efficient. For example, putting air roll and power slide on the same keybind because it's impossible to perform both of these actions at the same time. This allows you to free up some of the quality keybinds for something else, such as directional air roll or the rear view camera. Another rule of thumb is to try to limit the amount of responsibility each individual finger has. What I mean by this is that if you use the default controls of jump on A, boost on B, power slide on X, and ball cam on Y, this would mean that your thumb has 4 very important jobs, and the chance that you're going to be able to comfortably click all of these buttons effectively at the same time is very low, unless you implement some sort of weird grip like the claw grip. If you're curious, these are the settings that I personally use, and you can use these as a starting point when figuring out what works best for you. I also want to talk briefly about camera settings, and this is something that many content creators before me have already made hundreds and thousands of videos talking about, so I'm going to bring something a little bit new to the table. I've made a spreadsheet of all relevant pro players and their camera settings that you can take a look at for inspiration. These are the values pulled directly from Wikipedia, but the advantage of doing it this way is that it allows us to see the average values. So for example, if I want to get a better idea of what a good camera distance is, I would highlight the distance column and look down the bottom right where I will get information about the average, the furthest, and the closest camera settings used by professional players. Again, if you're curious, these are the settings that I personally use, and they're largely inspired by a mixture between Lethamyr and Flakes' camera settings. Rocket League is a momentum-based game, in more ways than you might initially realize. The second you bring your car to a full stop, you're putting yourself in a really bad position that as you climb higher and higher up the ladder, players are going to start abusing this more and more. Momentum, much like boost and jumps, is a resource that you shouldn't just throw out the window for no reason. The most common situations where students run into trouble with momentum is on their rotations. What many students will do is they will rush towards the play in a straight line, which at first makes sense because the fastest path between 2 points is a straight line, right? But the problem is that you're going to run into trouble if you get to where you need to be, but too early. Offensively, this can result in you pushing too close on a potential passing opportunity, resulting in you having to either turn around or risk overcommitting to a play. But staying further back can actually create more opportunities, and it is harder to defend against. If you're super close to the net, then the pass has to travel through 1, 2, maybe even 3 defenders. But if you space yourself out and take a wider rotation, this is going to allow you to keep your speed and momentum intact and not risk any overly risky positional plays. On the defensive end, we can see a similar theme, players darting directly back towards the middle of the net instead of taking a much wider rotation towards one of the posts. This creates a similar situation where you have to stop your car because although you might be where you need to be, you got there way too early, so you lose all of your momentum, which means you might be able to make a save, but you can't really properly clear the ball to a safe position. This ties nicely into our next topic. This is going to sound a little bit cliche because every coach, every player, every content creator that you see out there is always telling you and harping on you to rotate to the back post. The problem is that it has become kind of a blanket term with no clear direction, which makes it so that I see more and more players rotating closer to the middle of the net instead of taking a wider rotation and positioning safer. What I tell my students is to start thinking of a very specific part of the field as back post. This spot is just outside of the goal, pressed up as close to the wall as you can without actually being on the curvature of the wall. This is going to be your transition point every time you're rotating to defense. This is your Monopoly Go square, so to speak. Go collect your $200 before continuing play. Alternatively, you could go directly to jail without passing go. The choice is yours. The point of this is to get you to actually start thinking about it. Instead of just telling you to go back post, I tell students to think of this specific spot because it helps them to remember and use the information in game. Are there situations where it would be better for you to go near post? Absolutely. But as a general rule of thumb, you're going to want to take a wider rotation that allows you to not only cover a larger portion of the net, but maintain your momentum while doing so. This is something that in my time coaching, I've never heard anybody else cover to the same extent. Body language plays an essential role in our solo queue communication because you're not given many great options here. You can either stop to type to your teammates, you can use the broken voice chat system, or you can use quick chats, which, let's be honest, they take the focus away from the game and are in 90% of the cases used ironically anyways. So what we're left with is behavioral psychology, and learning to predict based on patterns that we notice. Here are a few key examples. Let's say that you are playing threes, and you are the furthest away from the ball on a kickoff. It is pretty obvious that the player on the far diagonal is taking the kickoff themselves, but who should go for boost? And who should cheat forward? As the last man back, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to adapt because you have a clear picture of everything that's going on in front of you. But what if I told you there was a way for you to know exactly where your teammate was going before it even happened, without ever saying a word to each other? Since you're not doing anything important during those first 3 seconds during that countdown anyways, use this time to gather information. Take a look at the tires of your teammates in front of you. Are they facing straight? Or are they turned towards either one of the boost pads? While this isn't a flawless system, it does work with a small enough margin of error that it's going to give you an advantage over an opponent who is simply guessing. But body language is also something that can be used during the play itself. Your positioning, your movements, your hesitations, everything you do on the field conveys information, not just to your opponents, but to your teammates as well. Some examples of good body language are, for example, flipping back towards the back post. This flip indicates that you have no intention of going back in towards the ball, and your team is going to be able to use this information to position themselves accordingly. Take this example instead. Notice how the player rotating out is showing intent to potentially cut back onto the ball at any time. This causes confusion and hesitation for the teammate pushing forward, and makes what would have been a routine clear into a defensive scramble. Something that comes up at least once in every single one of my sessions, regardless of what rank, is hesitating. And this tends to go hand in hand with both momentum management and body language. A quote that has become a staple in my sessions is, "It's better to make the wrong decision and commit to it than it is for you to make the correct decision too late." Let's say that you are sitting in net as your team is on their defensive rotation, and the opposing team is charging at you. You're sitting there trying to make up your mind if you should go for the challenge or stay in net. And what happens is that you enter a state of analysis paralysis, where you're overthinking the situation and all the possible options as opposed to just making a decision and sticking to it. Let's say that for whatever reason, going for this challenge was not the correct thing to do. Even if that's the case, granted that you made the decision early enough, your teammates are going to notice and they are going to be able to position accordingly. If you sit in the net and do the famous wiggle dance of hesitation, your rotating teammates might be thinking to themselves, okay, well, teammate should have this. Okay, he's not going. He's still not going. Okay, well, somebody's got to do something, right? I'm going to go. And over the course of those 2 or 3 seconds that it took them to make up that decision, you also made the decision to go. In this scenario, even though it was technically your ball to go for from the start, it is your hesitations and slow decision making that directly caused that double commit. This is a topic that is extremely important, and I will be making a dedicated video to hesitations in the future. As I was writing the script for this video, I quickly realized that it would become far too long if I were to try to cover all 10 topics in a single video, since many of them actually deserve their own dedicated video to explain them in full detail. Therefore, you can look forward to next week, where I will be continuing this series with 5 more common mistakes I frequently discuss with students. In the meantime, if you're interested in getting a private coaching session with me, Gamers Ready has recently merged with Medify, and you will find a link to my coaching in the description. I am also the only coach that offers free consultations, so if you have been on the fence about getting a coaching session, we can chat about what we would end up doing and how we can best benefit you as a player. Since the move to Medify, the support on my coaching has been out of this world, so I genuinely look forward to working with any newcomers that we may have watching this video. See you all next week for part 2.